Hey everyone, Mr. Macintosh here, and Apple has finally made the most highly anticipated new feature, Universal Control, available to macOS Monterey and iPadOS 15. You might want to give it a try, but are wondering, how do I use Universal Control? What are the requirements? How do I set up and configure this new feature? Well, I'm going to go over everything that you need to know about Universal Control next. Two quick notes before we begin. Usually in walkthroughs like this, there's a lot of stuff to go over. I always put chapter markers in here, so you can click Show More, scroll down, and you have a nice set of chapters. You can go to exactly this place that you need to go to. Technology moves very fast, so if something changes in between when I put out this video and Apple maybe puts out an update and changes Universal Control, check the update section and I'll put it right in here. Universal Control allows you to remote control another Mac or another iPad connected to your main Mac. So in this example, I have a MacBook Pro here, a Mac Mini with an external monitor, and an iPad. So let's use a quick example of how Universal Control could work. Let's say I've got this screenshot here on the MacBook Pro and I want to get it over to my Mini. All I need to do is bring my cursor over across the screen over here, and then I can now control the MacBook Pro and do anything I want with the Mac Mini's keyboard or mouse. So I can click on this file right here like this, and I've got it. I can bring it over here and now it's on the Mac Mini, and I can let go and we'll minimize, and there's the screenshot on the Mac Mini. Now let's say I want to get the same screenshot to my iPad. Let's bring the mouse cursor over, and now you can see that it changed to a circle, and now we're controlling the iPad. So let's click on here. We can do Command Space to search for the Files application. Now Files is open. Let's go back to our Mac Mini, grab the picture and move it over off the screen, and now it's over here. You can see it drag over here. It changes to a plus, let go, and now that file is on my iPad. We're going to go over more things like that later, but I wanted to give you a quick overview of what Universal Control is. How many devices can you use with Universal Control? Universal Control supports up to 3 devices. So for example, you can use this setup here, 2 Macs and 1 iPad, or you can use 1 Mac and 2 iPads, or you could use 3 Macs all together to be able to fully utilize Universal Control. What kind of devices does the Universal Control support? You can see here I've got an Apple Magic Keyboard that's connected to the iPad here, and I've also got a Magic Mouse that's connected to the iPad here, and those are supported. Also, if you have the iPad keyboard and trackpad, that works also, and you can use that to control. And you can use wired keyboard and a wired mouse, and even external third-party mice and keyboards work with Universal Control. What is the minimum operating system version that is required to be able to use Universal Control? For Mac, it's macOS Monterey 12.3 or above, and for iPad, it's iPadOS 15.4 and above. So as long as you're running an operating system version of those and above, you can utilize Universal Control. Which Macs and iPads are compatible with Universal Control? Well, first on the Mac side, MacBook Pro 2016 and later, 12-inch MacBook 2016 and later, Air 2018 and later, iMac 2017 and later, iMac Pro 2017, Mac Mini 2018 and later, Mac Pro 2019, and for iPads, iPad Pro, iPad Air 3rd generation and later, iPad 6th generation and later, and iPad Mini 5th generation or later. So as long as you have one of those versions, you can use Universal Control. Now, there's a caveat here, and you know from my previous videos that I've talked about unlocking AirPlay with the OpenCore Legacy Patcher and Unsupported Macs. I'm going to go over this in another video to show you how to unlock these features with OpenCore Legacy Patcher. It's really cool, and you can use Universal Control with an older Mac. Now there's some additional requirements that are really important to know about Universal Control. First of all, both devices need to be signed in to iCloud with the same Apple ID using 2-factor authentication to be able to connect to the devices automatically. And this is kind of like AirPlay, where if you want to be able to just wirelessly extend your monitor without having to be prompted on the secondary machine, then you have to be signed in with your Apple ID. When you're using the same Apple ID on both machines, you can extend your display and use Universal Control between your iPad and your Mac. The next thing is to use wireless. Both devices must have Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and handoff turned on, and must be within 10 meters or 30 feet of each other. So if we go over here to the iPad, we can go into the settings here and we can look at that we need to have handoff on and then cursor and keyboard enabled. And then we can use universal control. And the next thing is you might be wondering, well, wait, can I use a wired connection? And you can. To use USB, you must trust your Mac on your iPad. You've seen this before. If you plug in the iPad with a lightning cable to USB to the Mac Mini or the MacBook Pro, you'll get a message on the screen that says, do you want to trust this device? As long as you click trust, you can use USB instead of wireless. Okay, let's start out fresh to see how to set up universal control. I've logged out of iCloud or AppleID on the MacBook Pro and on the iPad. So we're just signed into our main device. So if we look into displays, we can check add displays and all we can do is really mirror or extend to the MacBook Pro. So we can click on that and then we'll see a little prompt come over here that says, do you want to connect to AirPlay? We'll click over here on accept and then we can extend the monitor to the MacBook Pro. So we can right click on here and stop mirroring and now we can extend the display. So that's basically all we can do. So what I also like to do is I like to go into the dock and menu bar and then go on to display and then turn on the menu bar item for display up here. And you can see what that looks like here for display. And then you can also go into the screen mirroring and click on always so you can always see the screen mirroring settings. And that's where you can click on the MacBook Pro again to extend the display with AirPlay again. And this is where you'll see a device when you want to be able to do universal control. So now that we know that, let's sign into each device's Apple ID and then we can show how to set up universal control on each device. So we'll go into the system preferences and we'll click on sign in and we'll do the same thing on our iPad. Okay, we're signed in our Apple ID on the MacBook Pro and on the iPad. So now we can check the settings. The way to do it is you go into displays and then click the add display button and you should see two sets of options here. You should see link keyboard and mouse, that's universal control, and mirror or extend to is also available to both devices now that we're signed in. Now, universal control, you can go into the advanced button here and see those settings. Make sure that allow your cursor and keyboard to move between any nearby Mac or iPad is on. And you can see here your cursor and keyboard can be used on any nearby Mac or iPad signed in with your iCloud account. And that's why we are automatically able to see that in here. And we couldn't see that before when we were signed out of our Apple ID. So the second option here is push through the edge of the display to connect to a nearby iPad or Mac. Allow the cursor to connect to a nearby Mac or iPad by pushing against the edge of the display here. And also you can click on automatically reconnect any nearby iPad or Mac. This will allow the Mac to automatically connect to any nearby Mac that you previously connected to. So once you've connected to it once and it shows up nearby, it'll automatically show up in here for you to be able to connect to. So let's look at that again. So let's click on add display and now we can link our first MacBook Pro. Let's click on that. And you can see here that it automatically detects the MacBook Pro and puts it in here. To find out which one you have, hover over it and it says this is MacBook Pro, and you hover over this is our Mac Mini. Now let's connect to our iPad. Click on add display, click on iPad and give it a second here. And there's our iPad. You can hover over that to see the iPad. And that is how you connect those devices here to be able to connect. So let's try that out. Now that we have all three, you can actually change the arrangements. Let's say that the iPad's on the other side. You can actually move the iPad anywhere you want. And you can do the same. The MacBook Pro was over here. You can move that over here and so forth. Now that we've connected one time to the iPad and the Mac, we can go back into those settings in the advanced section here and look at the push through to the edge of the display to connect a nearby Mac. So we'll click on done here. You can see that we're not connected to any because I disconnected. All I need to do is disconnect by going in here to unchecking. Now remember, we have automatically reconnect off. You can keep that on. So if you bring the iPad close to the Mac, it'll automatically connect. So before we get to that though, let's talk about the push through to the edge to display. What's nice about this is that we don't even need to go into these settings at all to connect. We're not connected now. So let's first connect to the iPad. We know that it's set up on the right side because we've already connected to it on the right side. All we need to do is take our cursor, bring it to the edge of the display, keep holding it there, and you'll see it disappear. And look at that. Keep dragging all the way through, and then it connects automatically. Now let's go back and let's go to the other side. bring it to this side, and there we go. See that? And it comes through, bring it all the way through. There we go, connected. That's how to do a manual connection to enable universal control without the automatically reconnect once it's available. Another thing I wanted to talk about is the automatically reconnect to the nearby Mac or iPad and what happens if the Mac or the iPad are sleeping. When you have this selected on and your Mac is sleeping or away and then you bring it back and wake it up, it will automatically reconnect. So let's watch that in action. All I need to do is click on the home button of the iPad here and wake it up, and it will automatically reconnect to universal control. When it goes to sleep, it does the opposite, and then it will remove itself from universal control. Or if it moves past the 30 feet connection range, it will remove itself from the universal control display pane here. And then we can see that it reconnects here. The same thing with the Mac. If the Mac goes to sleep, it will disappear from universal control. Or if it leaves the 30 feet range and we wake it back up or bring it back into range, it'll automatically connect right back to universal control. Again, if you don't want that to happen, all you need to do is go into that advanced section again and then uncheck the automatically reconnect to a nearby Mac or iPad that is previously connected to. And that's what happens if it goes to sleep and if you wake it up when that automatic setting is on. So what can we do with universal control? The whole point is to be able to transfer files and data and information between your main Mac and a secondary Mac or an iPad. So let's test that out. Let's say you want to be able to transfer a file on your desktop like this screenshot over to your MacBook Pro. Grab it, move it over past the screen, and you see that it turns into a plus sign. Let go. And there's the file. Let's say you want to bring a file from the MacBook Pro over to the Mac Mini. Let's grab this file here, drag it past the screen over here, and you can see that it turns into the plus sign. Let go. There's the file. Let's say you want to move something even bigger. Look at this DMG here. We'll do a Command I. This is 2 gigabytes in size. It'll still work. Let's also open up Activity Monitor so we can see how fast this file transfers. So grab it, bring it over here just like we did, and let go, and we can look down here at the data send speed. It's going to start to climb up here, and you can see that it's got a little bitty marker down here showing you the progress of the file transfer. We're transferring at almost 100 megabytes a second. So that's a pretty quick speed, and it's already 3/4 of the way done. Probably another second or two here, and it will be done. And that's it, 2 gigabytes in under 10 seconds. So now that we have been able to transfer files between it, what about being able to transfer like information? So let's use an example. Let's say, hey, I want to grab this link and I want to look this up later on my MacBook Pro. So do a Command C to copy the link, go over here, open up Safari, and we'll open up a new tab, and we'll click in there and Command V. And there's the page. We can move text and files from Mac to Mac. Let's use another example. Let's say we want to start moving some files from our Mac Mini over to our iPad. So the thing is that a little bit different about the iPad is that you can't just grab the file and drag it to the desktop. On the iPad, it has to have an application that supports files. So let's use an example. Let's just copy that. We already have that link here, copied to the clipboard of the Mac Mini. Let's go over here. We'll open up Safari and we're on google.com. Let's click in here and you can see that google.com is highlighted. We'll do Command V to paste it and hit enter, and there's the same link on the iPad. So that's just a perfect example of being able to move the clipboard from Mac to iPad. So now let's talk about moving a file to the iPad, and we'll look at what we want to transfer. Let's say we want to transfer this screenshot. Let's say we want to add this to Notes app on our iPad. So we'll move back to the iPad. We'll go to Notes, and we've got a new note open here, and we can just drag this screenshot all the way over here, and you can see that it does detect that it can move this file over. Let go, and there's our screenshot in the Notes app. And this works for Keynote, Notes, Numbers, all that, applications that can take an image or text. Now let's say we want to move a file over to the iPad. So let's go to Command Space, and we'll Files. Open up Files. And we can see that we already have some screenshots in here, but let's say we want to move this screenshot here from our MacBook Pro. Let's grab it like this, move it over here, and let go, and now it's in our files on my iPad. So that gives you a really quick overview of some of the things that you can do between moving text, files, and information between iPad, Mac, and Mac with Universal Control. I wanted to go over how to use a wired USB connection with Universal Control. If we go back to the Apple page here, it says to use USB, you must trust your Mac on the iPad. So I have this lightning cable to USB to the Mac Mini here that we can connect to the iPad to be able to use Universal Control over USB. So we can basically just go over here and connect it in here and plug it in. And as long as you see it charging here, you know you got a solid connection right off the bat. Now what's going to happen, we've already connected this, so we're not going to see that message, but you'll see on the iPad, it'll say, do you trust this Mac Mini to be able to connect to this iPad? You have to click trust, and now you can use a wired connection instead of wireless to be able to use Universal Control. For example, if you have a bad network connection, it's a little bit laggy, this is probably the best option to be able to do this. Plus, you'll be able to keep it charged over the long work day with whatever you're doing. And you can do the same thing with the MacBook Pro. You can use a USB-C cord to be able to connect the MacBook Pro directly to the Mac Mini, and you can use it over a wired connection there too. Now let's talk about some troubleshooting. This setup is in a way where we have to have, as we found out in this video, we had to have a lot of different things set up properly before we begin. And if we didn't have one of those things set up, Universal Control will not work. So the first thing we need to remember to do is make sure that you are connected with the same Apple ID across all the devices you want to connect to. And that says this right here, Apple Notes. You need to have the devices that you want to use with Universal Control using the same Apple ID, and make sure that two-factor authentication is on. So if I disconnect from my Apple ID in this MacBook Pro, Universal Control option to be able to move to this device is removed. And the same thing happens with the iPad. If we go back here and we go into this Add Display, the iPad will disappear if we're disconnected from the Apple ID or if we're using a different Apple ID. Now, if you have the Apple ID signed in and you still can't see this, another thing we can do is we can cycle off Wi-Fi and turn it back on and see if that will work. That's a possibility to be able to toggle that on again. We can also go into the advanced section here and we can cycle off the controls here. If we go back in here and go into advanced, we can turn this on. Now also keep in mind that when we go back into the advanced, this is the option right at the top to be able to enable Universal Control. For example, you can turn these options off, but if you turn this off, Universal Control is disabled, and you can click on here and you will not see anything. So that's how you know right away that you need to make sure that those settings are turned on. Click on that, then you can turn on this, then you can turn off the automatically reconnect, and you can actually turn this off and turn this on and just leave the allow Universal Control on. Another possible thing, if you click on displays and you don't see anything, make sure that the main device that you're using is properly signed in Apple ID. Just because you see this doesn't mean you're properly signed in. Now look, we have a notification here and we want to click on this, and it says, well, wait a minute, you got to update some Apple ID settings. Click continue to re-authenticate again. Okay, now that we're signed back into our Apple ID properly because we are re-authenticated, we don't see the red icon anymore, so we can go back into displays and click here, and then we can see link keyboard and mouse. Now, I want to show you another bug that can happen. If you go in advanced and toggle this off and click on done, a lot of times when you go back in there to turn it back on, it's not going to be showing up as enabled. So you're wondering what the heck, and you could be in this situation right now where you're clicking in this and you're like, well, wait a minute, in advanced it's all turned on, but I go back into here and it's not available. So a way to kickstart it is to click add display and do the mirror or extended display to the iPad or another Mac. So we'll click on this and we'll extend the display to the MacBook Pro, and now it's extended. And we can go in here, you can see how it's working, and then we'll go back into Add Display, and look, we've got link and keyboard and mouse enabled. Now remember when I said in the very beginning of the video that Universal Control can be compatible with older Macs? When we look at that compatibility list here, this is what Apple said. But just like on my AirPlay video, you can unlock AirPlay with OpenCore Legacy Patcher to be able to bring Monterey to unsupported Macs. And the same thing with Universal Control. This 2014 MacBook Pro is running macOS Monterey with OpenCore Legacy Patcher, and it allows it to be able to use to connect via Universal Control with the patcher, and it is absolutely amazing. And I'm going to make another video about that later to be able to show you how to do that. Even the Macs on this list that are supported for Monterey that are not on the Universal Control list, for example, 2015, 16, and 17 MacBook Pro. And I'll show you how to unlock Universal Control. And that's Universal Control. It is an absolutely fantastic feature. I know it was late, but I think the developers worked really hard to get it working right. And as we could see here in this demonstration, it worked really well. And I think a lot of people are going to really enjoy this new feature. Do you have any questions? Let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks.